As you read through On the Planet Mongo, keen eyes will spot the evolution from more classically illustrated figures into a more proto-comic book style. The genesis of what would become Superman, Batman, and Captain America. The DNA of Flash Gordon still thrives today in newer characters like Star-Lord, Mal Reynolds, and pretty much every character from Firefly, Poe Dameron, and even less obvious examples such as Captain Marvel. Alex Raymond's influence is undeniable, but when we look back at history to find the best of humanity, we have to be honest about the worst aspects too. So let's address the racist caricature in the room. Like many during that era, long before the internet and even before the concepts of xenophobia or racism were as studied as they are today, Raymond and many others were susceptible to that repulsive propaganda. In this era in which Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders are increasingly targeted due to misinformation and bigotry, it's important to call out these historical examples that most definitely played a role in building a somewhat intolerant populace. As much positive influence as Flash Gordon has had, xenophobia was at a fever pitch in the 1930s, particularly in regard to Asian and Asian American people. And tragically, that attitude still exists. This repulsive reactionary impulse was, and often still is, referred to as Yellow Peril, or Yellow Terror, or Yellow Spectre. Yellow Peril is a racist color metaphor that represents the people of East Asia as an existential danger to the Western world. It's a fear derived not from concern with a specific source of danger or from any one people or country, but from a vaguely ominous, existential fear of the faceless, nameless hordes of yellow people opposite the Western world. This is an arbitrary, false dichotomy. Sinologist Wing-Fei Leung explained the origins of this term and racialist ideology. The phrase yellow peril blends Western anxieties about sex, racist fears of the alien other, and the belief that the West will become outnumbered and enslaved by the East. These racist and cultural stereotypes originated in the late 19th century, when Chinese workers legally immigrated to Australia, Canada, the US, and New Zealand, where their willingness to work for lower wages due to desperate need was seen as a threat by xenophobic white workers. In the US in the late 19th century, white nativists spread xenophobic propaganda about Chinese uncleanliness in San Francisco. Chinese workers were deemed unfit for citizenship by the locals, which set the stage for the Asian and Asian American bigotry seen to this day. This abhorrent propaganda carved a path for the passage of the infamous Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882, which remained law until 1942, and was the first law in the US that barred immigration solely based on race. Academic Gina Marchetti identified the psychocultural fear of East Asians as rooted in medieval fears of Genghis Khan and the Mongol invasions of Europe. You may notice a slight difference between Mongol and the planet named Mongo. That's not coincidence. Neither, then, is the name Ming, his obviously Asian-inspired appearance, nor his merciless grip on the people of his world. These were xenophobic stereotypes being played out in popular culture. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, writers such as Raymond molded the atrocious notion of yellow peril into codified racialist motifs of narration. This was particularly prevalent in stories and novels in the genres of invasion literature, colonial adventure, and as seen here, science fiction. Academic Frank H. Wu said that anti-Chinese sentiment incited by contemporary politicians such as Steve Bannon and corporatists like Peter Thiel are recycling anti-Asian hatred from the 19th century into a new yellow peril. This is common to white populist politics that don't distinguish between Asian foreigners and Asian American US citizens. For the first time in centuries, the Western world, led by the US, is challenged by a people whom Westerners viewed as culturally backward and racially inferior only a generation earlier. Ming the Merciless, along with Fu Manchu and later Marvel's The Mandarin, are classic examples of yellow peril xenophobia, which was then at its height in the US and large parts of Western Europe. So then the question becomes, how should Alex Raymond be remembered? As a virulent bigot, or as a product of his time and of the propaganda that circulated among Westerners?